Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming. It's nice to see some faces from, I think there's a few from local to the sort of South Ayrshire area, and I think there might be one or two from further afield as well. So we'll have a bit of a mixed bag around here. Tonight's event, I'm going to try and share a screen in a moment with a presentation, which will do a little bit of a talk, and then I'm going to hand over to Malcolm, who will do a little bit of a demonstration, hopefully of some wildlife recording software and apps and websites that people can just have a quick look at and to show you some of the tools that we've got available nowadays to be able to show wildlife sightings. And then I'll pop back to myself and to wind up, and then we'll have a chat and discussion at the end to answer any questions that we have. So hopefully that's good. My name is Mark Pollitt. I'm the manager of the South West Scotland Environmental Information Centre. I'll just try sharing my screen now and see if that will bring up my my button's disappeared. There it has. Presentation. So, right, has that one popped up for everybody?
It's come up nicely, Mark. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, myself, Mark Pollitt, Malcolm works with me as well. Here is he's the person who does all the exciting things and gets out of the office. Although I have locked him up and put him behind spreadsheets recently over the winter, but he's looking forward to getting out a little bit more during the spring and summer again. And between us, we're pretty much what Swizik is. We are the local environmental records centre for Dumfries and Galloway. We hold and manage somewhere approximating to 4 million records of wildlife for Dumfries and Galloway and Ayrshire, and hold that information on a very large, rather cumbersome database that we are able to make use of, and I'll tell you a little bit about some of the information that the ways that the information we hold is used as we go along. So tonight I'm going to be talking about recording local wildlife, and I'm hoping everybody's here with the aim that we're all wildlife enthusiasts and we have an interest in our local wildlife. And one of the rather sad facts is that our local wildlife's not always been doing as well as it could be. We know that there's lots of pressures on wildlife. This is an interesting species. This is a garden tiger, a type of moth, very quite common in our region, but and once very, very widespread across the UK, but has been contracting in range, despite being quite a generalist as far as moths go. And so all these sort of things that pressures that our wildlife are under, and one of the ways we can all help is help us to understand and paint a better picture of where our wildlife are and how it's doing, and contribute a little bit to the science behind it by fairly simple methods. So I hope that's why everybody's here today. I'll hopefully be able to give you a little clue as to how you can all contribute to that. We're talking about wildlife recording, but I suppose we should start off by saying what it is. If you look at a definition, it's basically the scientific study of distribution of organisms and how they're located throughout the landscape. It's something that that anybody can participate and help with. It doesn't require a lot of effort, and it's in its simplest forms at least. And actually, in this country, we're very fortunate in that most of the information we collect and gather is gathered by volunteer or amateur naturalists, people out and about taking a walk, people carrying out surveys in their own time, free time. It's not a very common situation in the rest of Europe or even in many other countries. We have a much higher volunteer participation in amateur naturalists of amateur naturalists in the UK. We have a historical. It goes back to historical times where the Natural History Society is dating back into the 1800s, and we just have a long history of doing it. And we have one of the benefits of it is that we have a probably more detailed, surprisingly more detailed knowledge than most other countries do of the distribution of our wildlife. So it's a little bit different in the marine environment because it's not quite so easy for you to go and volunteer and wander into the sea and record the fish. So that's mostly done by more professional organizations. But in the terrestrial environment, it's very much a volunteer occupation, if you like, for most of the time. Who can be a wildlife recorder? Well, of course, you could be. Me and Malcolm are, but we're sort of semi-professionals. Professionals. We're professional in our work time, but we also do it in our spare time as well. And of course, you could be a very keen naturalist who's a specialist in their field. But more often than not, it's just straightforward, simple bird watchers, gardeners, walkers, dog walkers. Anybody can contribute to painting a picture of where our wildlife lives in our local areas. You could start by taking part in some organized surveys, but you may need quite a little bit of skills and experience to do so. So if you want to start taking part in wetland bird surveys, and you need to know your birds and how to count birds, or pollen or national plant monitoring scheme, you'll need quite a lot of skills to do that. And these sort of surveys are great. They do give us lots of information and fantastic quality and well-structured information. But even somebody walking the dog or just going out in the garden can contribute really valuable, useful information in an unstructured way. So there's no one going to be saying you have to do it. You have to go and visit at a particular time, or you have to go and visit 5 times a year or 10 times a year. It's unstructured wildlife recording is just that. It's casual. It's at your leisure. You could go out and record one record a year. You can record all the species you see. You can decide you only want to record hedgehogs. You can do as much or as little as you like. And if you just learn how to share that in the right places, and that can all chip into the big pot that allows us to understand our wildlife. So I suppose I'm going to give a little bit of a background of what makes a little wildlife record and what makes a good one, and what the sort of information that you'll be asked for if you want to contribute information on citizen science in a citizen science way, so that you can see. There's a little bit of formality in terms of the type of information we collect. So the things we're going to need, every biological record needs, is what we generally refer to as 4 Ws, and they are the what, where, when, and who of wildlife recording. It's basically what you saw, where you saw it, when you saw it, and who's doing the recording. And every survey, whether it's structured or unstructured, will generally require that information to be collected. Some in its basic form. Obviously, you may be able to contribute extra information that adds value to your records, but all the surveys and all the wildlife biological recording apps or surveys will all ask for that basic information. So here's an example of a very basic record. Fred, a well-known resident of our local area here in Dumfries and Galloway, has decided he's going to record the snail that came across, that was crawling on his patio, and has identified it. He's said what day he recorded it, which was appropriately today, and he's told me where he's seen it, and he's given me a grid reference. That in itself is enough for us to make a dot on a map, put that information on our database, and share with all the other records, and for posterity, keep that for future generations who may want to be looking at the decline of brown-lipped snails in 100 years' time. We never know. We don't know. So one of the things that we're doing is gathering what we know now, but also it's a really useful baseline for future generations as well. So So that's a basic form of record. So if we look at the different components there, the who, we try and store, as a scientific record, we try and store your real name with it. Now, or the person who found it and or the person who identified it. So if you get help with identification, most of the recording schemes will allow you to be able to put in the name of the person who's helped to identify the organism if it wasn't yourself. But we try and store a real name. Now, many of the online websites nowadays, and anybody who's used websites will be, and anything which requires logins, everything requires logins nowadays, and quite often we all use synonyms for and made up names for ourselves. But we'd encourage you, at least for your wildlife recording, wherever possible, to be at least to use your name if at all possible. You can use your synonym on the website, but most of them have an option to put in your real name as well. And if you do that, that makes sure your data will be better used. There are still some of the national wildlife recording schemes who will get access and share data to share data that you share, who will reject records that don't have a proper name. We ourselves, we would take them in as at the record center here as just a particular, as an unknown app user of the particular app that the data comes from, or website that the data come from. But some people will reject the records if they're not if they don't carry the full scientific information. So if you want your records to be used, do use your real name if you possibly can. What you saw. This is the key bit, the identification, finding out what you saw. Many times it might be anything. It can be anything. It could be, you can record on many of the open apps and things that will show you there, pretty much anything from midges to whales, and everything in between. All you asked to do is to try and identify or provide the name of the organism that you require, and that could be at a precise level as you possibly can. There's always opportunity to get help, and there's more and more resources available for identification help than there ever have been. So, but there's also plenty of chances to get other people to assist with that if you need to be. We're always happy here to help, and there's plenty of options elsewhere where we can point you to if you want assistance. There are lots of resources nowadays, local websites, moth group websites and things like that, like this one here, or useful ID guides, Facebook groups, and there are even apps which are really just like this one called OBS Identify, which is quite a good one, which I can recommend as being a helpful tool for helping with identification. It's actually not even a UK app. It's a Dutch app actually, but it does have a very good photo recognition tool, which is helpful. I would never encourage people to rely on those IDs, but they can be very helpful in pointing you towards the right thing. And I think that's a useful one. So certainly one we would recommend. Malcolm will touch a little bit on the UK and iRecord and iNaturalist apps, which also have some assisted ID features within them as well. To date, you can record records from any time. So from today, from yesterday, you can't record one from tomorrow, as far as I'm aware. But you can, if you saw an adder in your mum's garden in the 1950s or whatever it might be, and you want to put a record in, you can put that record in. That's still a valid record. You don't have to say, oh, I'll put something in next time I see it. If you have data that you want to share or records you want to share, you can do so. You can also put dates in that are less vague, more vague, should I say, than precise. So most of the structures and databases will allow you to put iRecord certainly does. I'm not sure about iNaturalist, Malcolm. I think might be less key, less more precise records for iNaturalist for dates, but the iRecord tools allow you to put in vague dates. And if you send records through to ourselves, we're able to get to put in broad dates or date ranges into where we haven't got precise information. So that's, but as long as you have some form of element that ties the record to a particular time, that's a key feature. Where you saw it, that's also become much more easy nowadays than it used to be. It used to involve getting lots of large maps out and looking on that. You can still do that on paper maps, but there's also lots of things nowadays where you can go online and get grid references, or if you use the online tools, they'll have built-in mapping that allow you to generate a grid reference, which is what we typically use nowadays for storing the location of records. Also try and provide a location name. It's a good way of cross-checking the grid reference. If someone types the grid reference in wrong, it's the way that we can check to see if the grid reference has been entered correctly, if you've got a descriptive name in the same area. And by all means, use something, if you saw something, a badger run over near Colmanel or something, and you want to say, you can always say, yeah, Colmanel's the B road southwest of, then that'll be a good help to go with a grid reference. You can use a postcode. Postcodes are not bad in urban areas. They tend to be quite large in rural areas, so they can be helpful in just helping to narrow things down. But grid references is the preferred way that most things will be using. Right. I'm going to hand over now to Malcolm in a second, who's going to show you some of the apps and websites that we can use. As the two that I'm particularly going to use look at the moment is iNaturalist here, which is a great one for beginners, and iRecord. But we'll also mention there's lots of other apps. If you go on to things, there are lots of other species and either bird or butterfly specific apps as well. But if you want to be a nice generalist, we're going to look at these two here to see how they function, and get Malcolm will show you a little bit about how they work, and we'll talk a little bit afterwards about how they go. So over to you, Malcolm. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll take it from there. So let's see how I can do that. Stop sharing.
Right.
Over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you, Mark. So we're going to attempt something that we haven't really done before, which is sharing my phone screen with you. So we're going to see how that goes. Hopefully that's working. Can you see my phone screen now, folks?
We can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to show you the basic function of how the iRecord and iNaturalist app work. iNaturalist and iRecord are both free to download off most app stores. If your phone's not compatible, however, both these systems have an internet function as well, so you can still use them in your phone even if the apps aren't available, although they are mostly available in most phones now. So we're going to start with iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is the one we recommend the most for people beginning with recording. The reason is it's designed not for expert recorders, it's designed for members of the public. It's much more user-friendly. You don't have to be an expert to use it. And even if you get it wrong, it actually doesn't matter. But we'll have a look just now. So when you open up your app, the first thing you will have to do is create an account to create an observation. So if you can see my cursor, there's a taskbar up here, 3 lines. If you click that, up where you can see me, Malcolm Haddo, there'll be a login or create an account function. If you click that, you put your email in, you create a username, and then you're set to go for recording. As Mark said, if you can use your real name or something that resembles a real name, more recording schemes will be likely to use your records. But actually, as Mark does say, ourselves here at the Record Centre aren't as bothered by that, but it is worth keeping in mind. So when you open your app, you won't have all these records. These are my records. But once you open up your app, your records will appear here so you can see all your records. Now, to start a record, can you see the green plus at the bottom of the screen? That's how you start to make a record. One of the big drawbacks to iNaturalist is it does need evidence. It works on community verification. So unlike some apps like iRecord, you can't really record without a photo or audio recordings. The reason is if there's nothing to verify, the community can't verify it, so the record's stuck. So generally, you're either going to be taking a photo or audio recording in the field or importing it from your files. So your options are take a photo, record a sound, or take it from your files. I'm going to take one from my files. So I'll just pick something in here. I'll pick this. So once you've added your picture, you've started your record. You'll notice there's a What Did You See tab. If you click this, the AI is going to try and identify your organism for you. As Mark did say, you should never use the AI's identification as absolute proof that that's what it is. A lot of organisms are much more complicated than you can identify them easily from photos. And generally, with iNaturalist, the first option it gives you, it's pretty confident that's what it is, but that's usually a non-accurate taxa level. So that's maybe to genus, a family, an order. And then below that, you'll see top suggestions, and that'll try and suggest species that this is. So this has actually got it right this time, I'm glad to say. This is indeed an ash tree. And to agree to that, there's a tick. If you click the tick, you're agreeing, you're putting your species to your record. You've got a very useful notes tab here. This can be very handy if you've got additional notes that can help the verifiers to know what you're recording. If you're using certain identification features for a bird, you can say what you've looked at in your comments, or if it's a habitat, maybe for a fungus, knowing what it's growing on, what it's growing under, that's all very useful. So you can just go in your notes and type something. I'm going to say that this was a sapling, which it isn't, but you can put anything you like in there. Oh, I've absolutely just uploaded that. Okay. Apologies, but I'll sort that in a minute. Then you'll notice that the date's been done for you. If you've also got a smartphone that has connections with your Google and things, it might even have date stamps on them. But if you haven't got the date done for you, you just have to click the date and you've got a calendar, and effectively you just move around your calendar to say when you saw it. The location, if you allow the app to use your location, again, it'll try and do that for you. And if you want to check it, it's got a zoomable map. So you just have to move this cursor, this sort of sniper shot looking thing. That's your cursor. You can just move that to exactly where you saw it, and then click the tick. iNaturalist also has a name gazetteer, so effectively it's got a long dictionary of names that it's picking from. It's not always that accurate. Actually, it's got it right. This indeed was at Mill Farm in Kirgunnion, so that's fantastic. But if that wasn't right, you'll notice these three dots beside the tick. You can edit locality notes and put an exact name in there, which is really handy. There's big parts of Dumfries and Galloway which the iNaturalist Gazetteer is not very good with, so you end up with names for Castle Douglas and the actual locations near Glentrool or something. So it is definitely worth doing that. And once you're happy with that, you just hit the tick. The location visibility tab, that allows you to obscure a record. Unfortunately, with iNaturalist, the way that it's currently set up, if you obscure it on here, when it goes through to iRecord and the other recording schemes, it stays obscured. So we can't actually see the original grid reference or original spatial accuracy, which is a shame. But if you do want to do that, you just click that and you say, do you want it open? Do you want it obscured? Or do you want it private? If you do put it on private, basically it can't get verified, so it's not going to go anywhere, which is a bit of a shame. If you do have concerns about location visibility and sensitive records, I'd probably not use iNaturalist for those records just because we're not going to get them at their proper quality. And there is a captive or cultivated field. Basically, if for some reason you want to record your dog or your plants in your garden, that's fine, but we don't really want them at the record centre. So if you tick that, that means we're not going to get them through into our database, which is fantastic. We also get people recording their partners as Neanderthals and things, but that's perfectly fine. I just don't want them. And once you're happy with all that, oh, I have to put an ID back in my thing. Once you're happy with all that, you've got a green tick down here, and basically you just click that to upload your record. I'm not going to do that because this record's already been uploaded. You'll notice there's a projects tab. There are iNaturalist projects, but you don't have to add them directly on the app. They'll just connect directly to the projects generally. So I'm going to discard that. And we'll have a look at that accidental record. So this is it when it's uploaded. You can see your photos, you can see your notes, you can see your comments, your locations. But there are actually a few additional fields that come up once you've uploaded called annotations. And to get to those, you just scroll to the bottom of your record and you can add additional life stage information on there. So you can say if it's in bud, if it's an animal, it'll have footprints, tracks, dead. Those are all very helpful to add on there. On a record, you'll see this comments tab, these two talking boxes. If you click that, this is in effect your identification. So because iNaturalist works on verification, if somebody agrees to this, their identification will come up under there. In fact, I'll find one that's got some. So here's a centipede I recorded the other day. If I go into my comments, you can see people who have agreed to my identification or have something to say about it. It looked interesting, apparently. So there you go. And that's in effect how iNaturalist works. Really, really easy. The one thing I will show you, when you sign up for iNaturalist, because it's a states-based app, it's got quite strict GDPR restrictions. So when you sign up, you'll automatically have non-commercial records, which means we here at the Record Centre can't use your records for all of our purposes. So to change that, there's our taskbar at the top. If we scroll down to settings, I'll just do that again in case I did that too fast, sorry. At the taskbar settings, there's a section called default licenses. If you click that, you can then go into your settings to change the license so your record can be used by the most people. I put mine at CC0, which means there's no restrictions, but CC BY is fine. That way your record's still got an attribution to yourself, but we can still use the record to its full capacity. It's just worth being aware of. So that's iNaturalist. Very easy to use. If you're starting off in recording, it's definitely one we recommend. If you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. So I'll now show you iRecord. iRecord's the little one here with the dragonfly. Where iRecord excels in comparison to iNaturalist, one of the great things with it is you can record things without photographic evidence. So if you see, well, let's do a record. Well, I'll do that in a minute. But if you see something, let's say you saw a deer run across the road, probably can't put that on iNaturalist because it's never going to get verified, but you can put that on iRecord. And unlike iNaturalist, iRecord's verified by experts. So if it does get verified as correct, there's more likelihood that it is correct. So this is what it looks like when you open it. You'll probably have to again log in to start recording. Um, so if you can see my phone, again, we've got a menu down here at the bottom. If you click that, where you've got user, you can go where you can see Malcolm, you'll have login or create an account. If you click that, you can then create an account or log in. So this is what it looks like when you open. In here, you've got pending, so you can have draft records in there. And the tab next to it, this has got your recently uploaded records, so you can have a look to see what you've been recording. But to start a record, it's very similar to iNaturalist. You've got a big green plus. When you click that, you've got a few options. You can record without a photo with a plus, or you can take a photo there and then, or record with a photo that's in your galleries. Unlike iNaturalist, you can't record with audio recordings, unfortunately. It's a bit of a shame. And then underneath, there's a few show other surveys. Basically, there's a few forms that have been set up for certain things. So if you're a moth trapper, there's a moth list survey, which just allows you to put your moth trap in, basically. And there's also a species list survey. So if you're on a site and you don't want to put an individual record for every single thing you saw at that location, you can put multiple records into that. But we'll just do a basic record and we'll show you what it looks like if you're doing a record without a photo. So we'll click the plus. And on this one, you just have to search for what you found. So I'm going to say that I have just seen a tawny owl. Just put that in there and it'll come up. And all you have to do is click it. And this is you starting your record. If you've done that and you've later taken a photo or you're in the field and you couldn't be bothered to take a photo or whatever, and you do have a photo, you just have to click the camera at the top. And again, you can just take a photo there and then or pick a photo from your gallery. Unlike iNaturalist, the location's got two aspects to it, and you have to provide a grid reference and a location name on iRecord. And unlike iNaturalist, it doesn't do the location name for you. So if you click location, sorry, but that was too quick. If you click location, if you've allowed the app to use your grid to use your location, it'll try and do that for you. But if it's not right or if it's not too accurate, it's just like iNaturalist. You can move your map around and just click on the map where you've seen your thing. And if you click site name, just type in where your record was. Generally, the more accurate you can be, the better. I appreciate in Ayrshire, Dumfries and Galloway, you can end up in the sticks and you don't really know where you are half the time. If you're not certain, you can choose a nearby feature. So the name, I could say Cregunion Lane or a hill or a nearby town, that's absolutely fine. It just gives us a point of reference to where your record is. But I'm just going to put in Mill Farm Cregunion. And you'll notice as you use the app, it'll learn your sites. So you don't actually have to type in your regular sites all the time, which is quite handy. So once you've done that, hit back. The date will probably be preempted for you. I'll just assume you're recording here and now. But if you want to change that, just click your date tab and it's just like iNaturalist, it's a calendar. Just move back and put your date on, just like that. As the recorder, it'll probably assume you are the recorder. But if you want to change that, just click recorder. You're with your partner or something. You can just go in there and change the name. So I'm going to say Mark actually saw this tawny owl, which is fine. And just like iNaturalist, you've got a comment tab. That's a free text field effectively. You can put whatever you like in there. Again, habitat information, how you identified something, that's all very useful information you could add in here. So I'm going to say heard and seen. So I've said I've heard the tawny owl and I've seen it. So the bird verifier knows I'm not talking a load of nonsense, or at least he thinks I'm less likely to be talking a lot of nonsense. And then below that's your abundance. Just say how many you've seen or heard. I've seen one. Uh, then you've got a stage field. You can say what stage it is. So potentially you might in the spring you might find the nest. You could put nest in there. You might find chicks, and that's all quite helpful information. For birds, it is quite interesting. There are breeding codes. If you've done bird recording, you might be aware of this, but these are really useful for us. So if you know of a bird's doing a particular thing, you can put those on. So I've just said I've heard it, and I could put that on there, which is useful. If you know the sex, you've got a sex field. I'm going to say it was a male. And on here, you've got an identified by field. So let's say Mark's actually the one who identified that. I can put his name in there, and that just adds a bit of extra credence to the record and gives him a bit of credit. And at the bottom here, there's a sensitive tab. So I've just mentioned a nest, for example. You definitely would not want to be putting bird of prey nests online in a public forum. So you can click that, and that'll automatically obscure your record to a kilometre square. If that's not enough, you can actually go on the website and obscure it to a greater level as well. So that's basically how an iRecord record works. So once you've done, you can click finish, and you can see that's then in my draft folder. And then when I click upload, it'll then go into iRecord and be immediately available to us here at the Record Centre, which is very good. I think that's it really. I'll just show you the map just next to your plus. It's just quite a nice little thing. You can just see where you've been. So there's where I've been the last month. It's just a nice little thing that's on there. So I'm going to stop sharing my phone screen, and I'll just briefly show you if I can figure out how to get out of here. Stop share. I'll show you some of the website versions very briefly. Right, can you see my screen, folks? There should be a big beetle that's probably scared the life out of you.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, good. Okay. So one of the drawbacks with the iRecord app, here we are on the website, is you can't actually edit your records on the app. So if you've got something to change in your record, you will have to go to the website, which is a bit annoying. But it works in much the same way. Here it is. If you want to edit your records, there's an Explore tab here. And if you click My Records, you can then go down and see all your records. And then from here, you can either look at your records, which is this little tab here, or if you click the pen, that allows you to edit your record so you can change those details. So if I go to this record here, it's much like the app, but you can see all the details on there. And if you want to edit it from here, again, you just hit edit this record. As you can see, it's a bit more in-depth and complicated on the website, but it effectively works in much the same way. And once you've finished editing, you just save at the bottom. Once you're on the iRecord website, it's worth knowing on the home screen, if someone's verified your records, you get notifications here on your own homepage, and then you can go see your records and if they've been accepted or verified or what's happened to them. And iNaturalist also has a website function. It's much better than iRecord because most of the functions you can do on your app, you can also do on the website and vice versa. But it's worth knowing. Once you open your iNaturalist website, you open up in your dashboard and you can see my records there that have been somebody's commented on or identified, and that'll work the same for yourselves. And probably the one thing that's of interest on iNaturalist and iRecord, but particularly on iNaturalist, you can have projects. So I'll open this one here of Kilsure, which is one of our very projects we're very proud of. You can effectively set up a project on iNaturalist, which is based on a geographical area or a taxa as well. You can do them species based. And we've set this up for groups like Kilsture so that when they're doing citizen science, wildlife recording, it all goes in one place and they can use that to see what's going on, use it as an interactive tool. If I come back up here, you can see there's leaderboards, so they get competitive. They go against each other and see who can get the best species, the most species. It's a really good way of engaging the public. That is worth knowing about, I would say. But in essence, that's your iRecord, that's your iNaturalist. That's how it works. So I hope that's covered everything, or most of it anyway. Right, I'll stop sharing now and hand you back to the presentation. So it is worth knowing there's pros and cons to both. iNaturalist for yourselves, if you are beginners, it's just so much easier and straightforward than iRecord. You really just have to take a photo, identify it, and upload it. So really, really easy. As I said, it's not for experts, so you can have an absolute, not a single clue. If you've got a photo, you can whip it on there, and that's absolutely fine. Somebody will try and identify it for you. And unlike iRecord, it's not as one way. You can do most of the things on the app as you can do on the website. Big con for iNaturalist is you do need photographic or audio evidence. Without that, you can't record. And obviously, with things like birds, mammals, sea mammals, very hard to get photos that you can verify on an iNaturalist. Because it is so easy, there's not as much detail in the records. So for us, they're not necessarily as good a data quality as iRecord. But you can put that extra effort in, and that would be much appreciated in your comments field, in your annotations field. Unlike iRecord, iNaturalist is global. You can use it absolutely anywhere in the world. But the big downside to that with the AI is the AI will compare your thing to everything in the world. So you might get trees identified that are native to Chile, or frogs that are native to New Zealand. So please do not assume iNaturalist's AI is correct at all. I've also noticed if there's peanuts in it, it'll always assume it's a grey squirrel. So yeah, the AI is not to be trusted. It's a guide only. And unlike iRecord, with iNaturalist, it sort of forces you to upload your record immediately. I quite like iRecord for that, so I can put drafts in the field, and when I get home, I can check the details. But basically, with iNaturalist, once you've done it, it's immediately online. And perhaps by the time you get home, even if it's wrong, somebody might have verified it and it's went through. So that is a downside. iRecord, bit more complicated to use, but it is linked to national systems. So if your records are getting verified, they're getting verified by national experts. So whereas with iNaturalist, anybody can put an ID. If somebody says it's likely to be right on iRecord, it's more accurate generally. iRecord's great because you can record things you've seen without pictures, as I said. That's a really good tool. And for us at the Record Centre, because it forces you to do the 4Ws to a good standard, the data quality is just a bit better. And as I said, you can have draft records, which is really useful in Dumfries and Galloway and Ayrshire, as you can appreciate. You've often not got a very good data reception. If you don't know where you are in the field, you can do that when you get home, which is really handy. Unlike iNaturalist with iRecord, because it's that next stage up, you do need to know what you're identifying. So you can't just record, oh, it might be a giraffe, so I'll just put that on. If you don't actually know it's a giraffe, it's just going to get rejected. because there's a bit more to it, it's a bit less user friendly. So, oh, something's happening. It's a bit less user friendly. So if you're looking at using these tools for a community-based project, be aware, you know, people with families, schools, and things are probably less likely to interact with iRecord as they are iNaturalist. And with iRecord as well, because it's not a one-way, it's more or less a one-way system. You have to go to the website to edit your records and things, which is a bit of a pain. Okay. And of course, there are other apps. There's more apps than there's ever been, in fact. But one I will mention in particular is BirdTrack. I'm not sure if some of yourselves here are birders, but BirdTrack's very much a birders app, and that's perfectly valid to use. And increasingly, you can record more species, different taxa on BirdTrack. You can do orchids and dragonflies and butterflies and all sorts on BirdTrack now, I think. But one of the big downsides to BirdTrack is it's less accurate. So usually you record on a site-based format. So if you're at, let's give an Ayrshire example. If you're at Turnberry, you probably just put Turnberry, which is fine, but which is fine for birds. But if you're recording, I don't know, a plant or something very specific, it's not quite as accurate. You can make it more accurate, but it's a bit of a faff, really. But yeah, that's just another option. So I think, am I now handing back to yourself, Mark? So I'll hand you back to Mark, and you can ask any questions about any of that in a minute.
Okay, there we go. I think that's back to me. I think you can still see my screen. That's a little summary of some of the sort of modern tools that are available on the web now. But we're perfectly happy to be old-fashioned too. If we want to go back one layer of old-fashionedness, that's fine. People can happily pop things on a spreadsheet. We have spreadsheets on our website that you can download and fill in if people enjoy doing that. Which you can do that, you can send in record and send them in to us via email. That's not a problem. Happy to do that. If you want to go back further, pen, paper, that is perfectly acceptable too. We have wildlife recording forms online. If you don't want to fill a form in, you can send us an email. You can write it on the back of a fag packet. We'll take anything as long as it's got the 4 Ws and that you're diligent in your identification and can help. And we're obviously more than happy to help out with that wherever we can. We mentioned sensitive records. Malcolm touched on sensitive records. It's very worth noting. It's quite possible that you may come across something on your travels out and about that you regard as sensitive. It could be a raptor nest or something like that. If you're not happy to put them onto a public website, I don't think they should go at public resolution on the website. You're more than welcome to send them direct to us. Our database uses the National Sensitive Species List for Scotland, and we blur records according to that in public and only make those available in detail where they're required for use, maybe in planning situations or for appropriate uses, whereas we would hide them from more open public use. So we can do that, and they will not be visible at full resolution through the centre ourselves. That could be rare breeding birds, or it could be some other species that you wish to if anything you don't wish to share, more than happy to send direct to the Record Centre. So I'm just going to do a few slides that touch on a little bit of what happens to your records there once you've sent them, and where they go and what they're used for. And then hopefully we can stop at the end and have a little chat about what our options are, or any questions you might have about aspects of recording, anything. And don't, like I said, when it comes to questions, do have a think. If you've got a question you think it sounds silly, don't worry about it. It's quite likely somebody else will have the same sort of thoughts. No silly questions around here. That we're all happy to answer anything at any level, not a problem. So what happens to your records? as Malcolm mentioned, whether they go via an app or a website, they are checked, and obviously you'll be pleased to know that when you put them on the app, or on a website app or a phone app or a website, the forms make you put things incorrectly. So that's one of the helpful things. But you can also we can also sort of check the things here as well. So if we receive our paper records, we obviously do the same processes by making sure that the names are correct, the species names are using a proper recognized taxonomic list. And so we do all the validation checks as well, as the same as happens when you're using a website. And so, have you given us a name? We ask all the same questions of every record. Is the date a valid date? If not, we'll get back to you and say, could you give us a date for this, or could you give us a grid reference for this? Is it species? Species names is an interesting one. We often get there is a common blue damselfly and a common blue butterfly. So if you told me you've recorded a common blue, it's quite helpful that we know what you're recording. So scientific names are helpful where there's ambiguity. You can, and they minimise the ambiguity there. And obviously, similarly, if you can give us grid references, it's great. If you can only give us a description, that's fine. We can make an estimated grid reference for records if you can't do it yourself. So not a problem, but more than happy to help out. And we'll try, and if you do send things through to us, we may ask you one or two questions to clarify that, so we can get as good information as we can onto our system. Once the records are on system, Malcolm mentioned that the apps are verified by an expert. Now, unfortunately, Mr. Darwin here isn't available around to help us, but we do have quite a lot of volunteers across the whole of the UK who do a lot of the verification. The iRecord data system has volunteer verifiers for many taxonomic groups, not quite all, so not everything is verified by an expert, but most things are, and it's getting better all the time. It does rely pretty much solely on volunteers to do that on the online systems. We similarly, when we get data into the centre here, we similarly do checks and verification here. With our own expertise, as well as working with local people to help and check records as well. So, and that's an important quality control, because the information can be used for important things thereafter. And we try to make our records as good as we can. Obviously, that's the aim of what we're trying to do, is to gather good quality information. So, I'm not going to describe this, you'll be pleased to know, but just to let you know that what you've done when you pop records onto iRecord or send them through to the local record centre is you've set that journey in motion. The information that was once in your head is now in motion between various organisations, for iRecord ourselves, the NBN Atlas, local recording scheme, lots of arrows in and out of those organisations, so that information can be used, and that's what we all want, the information to be there. So what sort of uses are the data that get collected put to? Well, from a local point of view, things like the county bird reports, or we produce our own little booklets and atlases here, which have tried to help with identification. When the shield bugs one, had to put that one in because Malcolm's here. You'll see his shield bug over his left shoulder there. So that one is Malcolm's doing, and a rather lovely publication it is too. But yes, we do produce things like that help with local awarenesses and atlases, but also it gets pulled together and gets shared with national organizations who are able to pull together things like national atlases of where different species are, where the distributions are and how they're changing, and with things like looking at the phenology of different species, what time of year the records pulled together can show us what time of year species are active, and highlight where that has changed over time as well, which is certainly happening in response to climate change. So that local picture starts to chip into the big national picture as well. allows us to start to look at how those distributions and populations are changing. This was a lovely publication a few years ago on dragonflies in the Britain and Ireland, looking at how using both structured surveys, which are formal surveys carrying out methodology, but using an awful lot of just casual records showing the distribution, and that was able to paint a picture of what's happening with our dragonflies around the UK. Now, it's looking at the change in distribution. This is one of the nice things is that we have generally a positive story on dragonflies. Most species are doing quite well. They are expanding their distributions, probably a result of climate change. Interesting, only a handful, the ones on the right-hand side are there in red, which are species not doing so well and contracting their ranges. And in fact, those are 3 species which are quite important in our neck of the woods and which we'll see quite regularly in our area. They're associated mainly with acidic habitats and bogs and things like that, and they're things which are not faring too well nationally, but we still have them in relatively widespread squares across the southwest of Scotland. We're able to monitor things like invasive non-native species, so we can look at recording species which can be problematic, like Japanese knotweed or there, but also it's volunteer wildlife recorders are the eyes and ears for early detection of newly arrived species which may pose a future threat, or can help monitor populations of long established species and how they've been changing. I have a little animation here which shows the distribution of one of those species over time. And I'll let you have a little mull over this. So starting in 2000, that's the distribution of records that we had. And over time, this non-native species has grown in Dumfries and Galloway and Ayrshire and spread there. So I'll let that loop a couple of times. If anybody thinks they know, I'm not going to ask anybody to type in, but feel free if you want to have a guess, because I'm going to reveal it fairly shortly. But if anybody wants to think what that one might be, have a mental quiz to yourself. And I'm going to reveal it now that species that's changing the distributions there is none other than the grey squirrel, which when I arrived down here, when we solely worked in Dumfries and Galloway in 2004, was a very scarce species in our region, and then has spread massively in Dumfries and Galloway throughout that time, and expanded its range also in Ayrshire. So most of that information has been solely gathered by volunteer wildlife recorders. So wildlife recording helps us set priorities for species conservation. It allows us to identify which species are doing well and bad. We have a limited amount of money to spend on many of these things, rather sadly not enough in many cases. And we have to prioritize where we put our money. So things like assessments of birds which are declining, which are not doing well, plants, or all sorts of other species. We can identify which ones need our help the most, highlight the species which are declining the fastest, and we can hopefully produce conservation plans and things, strategies, biodiversity action plans, which allow us to focus our attention and our funding on those areas. We have legislation which covers lots of protected species. The species themselves or the habitats they live in can be protected under all sorts of different legislation that have been passed throughout the last 40, 50 years. And as a result of that, there's lots of protected species identified within the legislation, and there are responsibilities on people in that. So records of protected species are very helpful in that we can make sure that those people who have responsibilities or are doing potential activities which may harm those protected species can be made aware of their presence when it's needed to be known for things like development processes. We also have a network of protected sites around the country, and it's rather good that we do have SSSIs, national nature reserves, special protection areas, etc. All of the information that those sites were designated from the first place. It kept first place came from biological recorders, people recording wildlife. If you don't know where they are, you can't designate sites. So we can't protect sites if we don't know where things live. So wildlife recording chips in right at the fundamental basics to protect our protected site networks. And of course, we shouldn't forget that there are always plans and developments for things going on, and we can hopefully, when people come to do an environmental assessment, centres like ourselves are able to provide information into the decision-making process that allows us to give some information and point people in the right direction, and say, these are known from your site, these are the protected species, these are the locally uncommon species, these are the ones which are on our local biodiversity action plan, which are in your area. Please take account of those in your process. And we at the Record Centre here are there as purely as information providers, and we can just make sure that the information we have and the information that people tell us gets to the right place. That's all we're trying to do. My last slide before we move on to questions is just to remind us that a big thank you to everybody who does contribute records. We're always asked to justify ourselves nowadays, and it seems odd that you have to justify nature in terms of an economic value, but we can put a value on our time and the contribution that our volunteers put to, and there has been some studies, and it's estimated that somewhere in the region of £8 to £10 million per year is the value that even that's just the organised structured recording contributes. If you look at the unstructured recording, that was estimated to be in the tens of millions on top of that, and that's every year. And the study from a couple of years ago showed that the public investment that someone like the public bodies put in is multiplied 20 times because we have volunteers who are active in nature conservation. So your time and effort does have a monetary value that, and sometimes we have to justify things in those terms, sad though that may be. But it is worth recognizing that we are incredibly good value for money in the wildlife recording sector in doing what we do. I'm going to stop now, and we're going to have a little time for a bit of questions, and we'll come back and have a chat about anything that anybody wants to raise. I'm going to stop sharing, and thank you for your time for listening.
We just had an iNaturalist query come in while we were talking there, Mark. Rachel, what was it specifically you wanted me to go over? And then I'll go over that again. That's no problem.
You just said you were talking about the iNaturalist and changing the settings, and I just didn't quite catch what you needed to change. I looked at the default observation action. Was that it?
Yes. Was that to do with the copyrights and the...
Yes.
Yeah. Fine. Right. You should be able to see my screen again. Is that right?
Not yet.
Oh dear. It says I'm screen sharing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you are, but maybe my screen's blocking.
I'll try that
You
again.
could see it, Malcolm.
Oh, sorry. Right. You can blame Mark for that. I do apologize. Right. So to get to your settings, you've got this taskbar at the top, your 3 lines. And if you come down here to your settings, there's a cog. Can you see the cog here? And the thing we need you to change for your licenses is called default licenses, which is just down here. And we can see that. And basically, for Swizik and the other recording schemes to use your data most efficiently, it needs to be in a non-commercial license. So if we click on default observation license, if you could put CCO or CC by, you just click which one you want, and then you change your license. You can have a separate license for your photos and sounds. That's absolutely fine. If you're a photographer, professional photographer, you can still perfectly have a CCO, CC by record and then have a commercial license for your photos. That's no problem. The key one is having a default observation license for the record itself. Did that make sense?
That's great. Thanks very much.
Thank
Yes,
you.
it's one of the slight quirks is that although we're a non-profit and we are hosted by a non-profit and charitable organisation, most local record centre work is, well, it's never been tested legally, is regarded as being commercial in nature, or some of our aspects are. For example, if we do a query for someone comes to us and says, a commercial consultant comes to us and says, "Can you tell me what protected species here?" As you might expect, we say, well, we're not giving you our time for free. We're going to charge you for our time in sorting that out for you. But that makes it a commercial use. So, for example, for us to use that data in a commercial thing for development control, for example, we wouldn't be able to use anything which says which is licensed with a non-commercial license on the record. So it's just one of those sort of little quirks. But unfortunately, that's just how it is, and the default for iNaturalist has always been the non-commercial license by default. So we encourage users who do that to try and do that if they want the records to be made best use of for things like development planning and things like that. So. Right.
We've got another question there
Yes.
about location coordinates for any record. If you're using the apps, if you allow your phone to use your location, it'll help you find your location coordinates on the mapping when you're putting in your location. If you aren't using the apps and you're in the field, there's a number of ways you can do that. You can convert what3 words. So you've got what3 words in your phone, we can convert those into grid references. And if you're on your computers, the iRecord, iNaturalist websites, it has the same mapping system, so you can click in the map just as you can in the apps to find your coordinates. I hope that covers that.
If you want to look things up separately, there's lots of individual websites that you can also use. This is one we happen to use quite a bit, which is, I think you can hopefully see my shared screen at the moment. It's got a rather unusual name called Cookera. But this has a base map which you can zoom into and click on, and it will give you a grid reference in the top left-hand corner of this of wherever you. And the further you click in, and the finer your grid reference becomes. And this has some base mapping. The base mapping's changed recently. It's not quite as good as it used to do. But it also has. You can also switch to showing a satellite picture as well. So you can zoom into a site and then very easily get a 6-figure grid reference. So if you're not using an app and you wanted to use something like a spreadsheet and look up grid references, that gives you another way of. There's quite a lot of websites that will do this. This is a good one. Another one that we use fairly regularly is Past Maps, quite a good one. Where's the Path? Grab a grid reference. I've got lots of here. There's lots of things online which will do very similar. So, but this one's quite a nice one because you can get your grid reference fairly quickly just by a quick click. So we quite like this one as a regular one that we use. Anything else? Anybody else got any other burning question? One thing that quite often asked is how often people should record things, particularly if it's common things. You say, okay, I'm going to record some things in my garden. How often should I record the sparrows in my garden or whatever? And the answer is that we often give back is you do what you want to do. If you want to record your sparrows every day, we'll take your sparrow records every day. Would I say that's the best use of your time? Probably not. However, if you wanted to do that for your own purposes and share the records with us, absolutely fine. We would be no problem. If you wanted to look at the value of your records, you might want to record them when you've got unusual numbers, or you might want to record them at different times of year, so that you, for example, maybe during the breeding season, You would make a record if you see youngsters around because you know they've bred, and you can put the record that they've bred. You've got youngsters nearby, or you might want to make a record in the winter when you've got a high number of birds on in your area. So I think you can use a little bit of discretion. The answer is you can, as frequently or as infrequently as you want, but just balance what you think is useful for your own time. And we're happy to accept 365 days a year of sparrow counts if you wish to spend your time doing such things. I've got another couple of things that have been mentioned here. Malcolm mentioned things about the captive and non-captive things on the iNaturalist. You've got the little toggle there for that. And people sometimes ask, what is wild and what's not wild, and that's quite a little thing to discuss. We're obviously only interested in things. We're not interested in cows and sheep. Their livestock, so those sort of things. But we are interested in garden plants that have colonized areas outside a garden onto the local railway track, for example, or things like that. So where non-native species are colonizing naturally of their own accord, by all means, that's a record. We don't want records of your petunias in your garden particularly, but if you suddenly have a petunia outbreak on the local railway track that are growing of their own free will, that's perfectly fine to record. Malcolm, any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because different societies and different recording schemes take different stances. I think officially BSPI counts anything that overhangs into the wild. So I think in theory, a fig tree that's hanging over a cycle track's perfectly valid to record. But for ourselves, generally, if you know it's been planted or you generally suspect it's been planted, then we wouldn't really want that record. But if you're not sure, you're on the fence and it's a potential invasive in particular, maybe something like variegated yellow archangel, that's probably worth putting on as a maybe wild, would be my suggestion.
Anybody else got any other questions, burning questions that they're left to ask about how they might do their own recording, or is there anything they want to know that we haven't mentioned regarding some of the apps, or just doing things in a different way, like good old pen and paper? I'm more than happy to chip in if anybody has anything. I had someone mentioned, I've got one down here which was noted previously, is about sort of engaging with young people. The apps and things are usually regarded as being for use of 13 plus for most of the registrations, which is fairly typical. If you want to engage, often we have communities that are keen to get schools involved, or people want to get grandchildren involved, or kids involved as well. There are apps, and iNaturalist has a sister app called Seek, which is designed specifically for younger people, for young kids to use. Seek is quite nice. It has a little gaming element, a little targeting element, if you like, for encouraging recording, but also it can tie into that. And there is ways of tying that into iNaturalist if you've got schools involved or supervision involved. So that can be done as well. So Malcolm's used that a little bit. If you want to say anything, Malcolm.
Yeah, we've done that a few times in a few schools with Seek. If you are, I know people can be worried about kids putting naughty pictures online and things. So Seek effectively connects to an iNaturalist account, which can be a school account. So you can check what the kids are actually recording before it goes on the internet. So you're not going to get, some kids bum on the internet, which is not great for anybody. But then they can still contribute to the recording. And the other option, obviously, you maybe don't want kids really on the screens at all if they're outside. What we've done in the past, if there's a teacher or myself were there, we just let the kids go out and find the stuff, and then they bring it back or take me to see it, which is absolutely fine. Yeah.
Lovely. If anybody else has got anything, if nobody, I think we'll let people enjoy the rest of. Oh, we've got a new comment here. Sorry, I was just checking that one. Very informative. Thank you very much, David, for your comment there. That's much appreciated. I hope that's been helpful for people, to give people a little bit of a background. If you need anything, we're here. We're contactable. You now know our faces as well as our names. We're not ogres. We're quite happy to help. And if you want any advice or anything, myself and Malcolm are more than happy to field information or questions for you, or point you in the direction if you're a bit uncertain. But hopefully, a few of you will have chance and a bit of confidence to give it a go. So, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your evening with us. I hope you have a pleasant rest of the day, and we'll say goodbye for now.